Pow.
Hey, this is Michael Idov, the author of the Collaborators, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
Yeah, this is great, man. I really appreciate you being on. The in certain worlds, like we're the same dude. We just started in different places, and in a lot of ways, you did America better than I did. Even it's an amazing thing. So you start in the USSR, and I have heritage going back to the Baltics, Lithuania, possibly.
Oh, wow.
It's so hard to tell. Yeah,
Neighbors.
it's so
All right.
hard to tell.
Yeah.
Neighbors,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But a lot of that history is just wiped away by World War II, and so we just sort of don't know anything about it.
Well, a lot of it was wiped away by the USSR as well, because, when I was growing up in Latvia, I didn't realize I was living in an occupied state and I was technically part of the occupation because, I was just like a kid living in a place, and it seemed kind of cooler than the rest of the Soviet Union because I've been to the Russia proper,
Right.
a few times as a kid, and I was like, yeah, I like my place better, but there's a local language, there's a Russian language. I grew up in a Russian-speaking family, and it never occurred to me until a certain age that, wait a second, like, what are we doing here exactly? And my grandparents, I was born there, my parents were born there. My grandparents
Right.
came as school teachers, but they came in 1945 after the Latvia was annexed very much against its will to the Soviet Union, and that was the part that it took the 90s and the independence movement and all that to understand that's where I'm from. And actually, one of the things I'm pretty feeling pretty guilty about is not speaking the language properly, because I speak a little Latvian, but not as well as somebody who has spent the first 15 years of his life in the country should. So my apologies to
No, there's no
to
none
the
to apologize
Latvians.
for
But
it.
no, it's crazy, but yeah.
You also speak English, which is really hard to learn.
Oh
Yes,
please,
it's-
I'm learning German now. That's hard.
Oh yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
God.
yeah. The
That's
different forms and how
that's
formal they are
really-
about their forms.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, the I never know what like gender anything is, because it's like die, das, der. It's almost unlike in Russian and some other Slavic languages, it seems almost arbitrary. Like this, like the fork is a she, and the knife is an it, and the spoon is a he.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's
Well,
a hard
there's-
one. English is
There's
fine.
the modern words that have come out primarily from computer language and everything, and then that also is crazy. I know how to say a lot of words in Arabic, because they're just carburetor, battery. It's the same. Pizza.
That
It's
was
all
a
the
really
same.
fun part of your Stuart Copeland interview when you like broke out into Arabic.
Right.
That
And
was,
really,
that was fun.
We
to
didn't
do.
really say anything. We kind of said,
Right,
"Hey,
right. It was like, "What's
man?"
up?
You know?
Hello." But it sounds impressive when you don't know it, which brings us to
Yeah.
spy literature. It all sounds
Yeah.
impressive when you don't know what actually goes on, right?
Yeah.
Which is what
and
I was apprehensive coming here, because it's like, look, you're the real deal, and I don't know how you guys feel about spy novels written by civilians.
I love them. I've got one. It's not here in front of me now. I'm reading one now. It's the latest Tom Clancy novel in the Jack Ryan series, and so I'm reading that. But it's by Andrews and Wilson. They're the ones writing it. They're friends of mine. I love it. I love look, and you'll get this. I love the desire for you all to take what we do and make it real. Even if there's fancy and fantasy in it, you're also trying to be like, how does Pete really do this thing? And you all pursue that greater connection to the truth.
Right. Well, thank you for saying that. And of course, Clancy is a good example. I mean, he's always done his research, and I'll admit it, I haven't checked out the post Clancy output, but I mean, even in the last novel that he had published during his lifetime, in 2013, like, he pretty much predicts Russia's invasion of Ukraine a year before it happened, and that's the quality of research that the guy had. So there's
and they also kept trying to take him to court for being too accurate with. He's like, This is all open source.
Yeah, I mean, John le Carré in Our Game predicted the Chechen War like a year before it happened. So yeah, there's the best ones. Know what's up. Sometimes better than the governments.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
So talking about, so your book's called The Collaborators, everybody. There's the link down below. You can get that. It's out is it out now or is it out next week?
It's out next week. It's out November 19th.
Perfect. So that'll come out Monday or something like that. Mm-hmm. What I like about what I've read about the book is you do get into tradecraft. And one of the things with tradecraft is it's important until the second that it's not, right? And sometimes you're inventing tradecraft, or you're taking the essence of tradecraft and you bend it to the situation that you're in, because it all really is a suggestion. There's best practices, and then there's the practice that's actually going to work in this moment. Do you play with that at all? Do you think about that? Do you talk to guys like me, or like, that wouldn't go that way? Because there's always that thing like, that feels wrong,
Well, it was incredibly important for me to keep things as realistic as possible. And, I have my weaknesses when it comes to, the inside of the CIA, the org chart, this kind of stuff. And yeah, I have friends in the intelligence community, of course. So like I went to them. They're not like you. They're not combat spies. They're like, we're talking more like the analyst side of it, which is what suited me for my purposes. But,
sure.
So it's a combination of like little things that, that you get from like there's a little detail, for example, when he's talking to the main character, Ari Falk, when he's talking to his colleagues, and they're just using GChat, and that is from real life. That is from real life, because I spoke to a friend of mine in the IC, and I was asking, like, wait, you guys don't have your own like extra special like signal on steroids that you use? And he's like, look, and he gave this perfect spy answer. It's like, look, this is it all depends on what your risk factor is. If your risk factor is the U.S. government, then by all means use something else. And in the meantime, we're all on Google, which was like a fantastic thing to catch, like a little detail like that. And some of it is, I've had exposure to sort of the workings of like U.S. government agencies, just not the clandestine ones. And it doesn't take too much of a leap of faith to think that, it's probably just another office. It's probably not that different from how like the State Department operates on the level of like, I'll admit to something. There's a little moment in the book when I'm describing the inside of Moscow Station. And, I have no idea what Moscow Station looks like. I know where it is, but I've never been inside. Hopefully never will. So what I literally used the decor and the setup of the Radio Free Europe headquarters in Prague, because it has very, it's a fascinating building, because it's like a U.S. embassy in all aspects but name, right? Because this is like it's an American finance NGO, and I work with them as a consultant, and so I just borrowed like the interior of that building. I was like, this is what in my book that's going to be the Moscow Station. And is it real? No. Is it probably very close to what it looks like? Yeah, probably.
Yeah, that's great. The blending of the reality and the story, and making look, they might change the office 10 more times in the next 10 years with an interior decorator and a budget. Who knows like what the heck it even looks like. But it does give us something to think about. You also write screenplays, teleplays. And so how much is your writing different between the two? Because in screenplays, you're using more dialogue to drive the story. Depending on how you write screenplays, and you probably are like interior Moscow Station. Then you leave that to the director to figure out what that looks like, right? So how do you balance those two approaches between screenplays, teleplays / novels?
No, it's true. It's a great question because these are completely different skills,
Right.
and you're absolutely right. When you write screenplays, I've been taught that directors hate when you like try to direct for them. So like you
Mhm.
never really go like the camera swoops down and show like no, you can imply it cleverly,
Mhm. Mhm.
in the way you phrase things, but like don't direct for the director. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm trying to keep things pretty spare. Um, and, hopefully this isn't messing up the sound. Now I have military helicopters outside.
You're okay.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah.
Oh, we can close the window just in case. Um, I'm in LA, and sometimes they're just like random ospreys flying around. But
It happens all the time
yeah,
up
yeah,
and
I
down
know.
the coast.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Where are you?
I'm in Orange County, but I'm in the
Okay,
flight path
okay.
of
You probably get those as well.
yeah. Well, John Wayne, and also there are a couple of old like World War II collections,
Mm-hmm.
museums that fly for maintenance because you got to fly these things. And so
Right.
there's one on the coast and one inland, and so they're always flying
Oh
over.
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, well I just had one here. So
Yeah.
anyway, no, you're absolutely right. Like you have to turn off the screenwriting part of your brain when you write
Hmm.
this because I mean I started out writing books. The first thing I ever published in the US in 2009 was, a novel. Um and then I kind of like pivoted to screenwriting because that's where my sort of that's what I love it, and that's what I went to school for. So I did dramatic writing and film studies, but these are completely different things, and there's a reason why a book is a book. There are so many books out there, I have to say, that are like clearly written like as underlying IP for the future movie rights. Like you can tell that the author just can't wait for this to become a movie. Like it's
Yeah.
barely a book, and I really didn't want that. Like it's cinematic in places because I like to sort of visualize action. And, there's one shootout where I had to like draw actually like a little schematic on paper, like where everyone is and things like that. But so it almost felt like I was directing a scene. But no, like it's prose. It has to read well on the page. This isn't some sort of way station, on the way to it becoming a movie. So that was actually super important for me to make it fun to read on the page. That's crucial.
You talked about a bunch of different places already. And in this day and age, you can write about a place. Like I'm writing a little novella, probably just for myself, but I'm talking about like what a guy like me might do in a given situation. And so I can place myself in Casablanca. Never been there, but I can look
I
on
have.
maps and I can look at yeah. So you have an advantage on me, right?
Right. Yeah.
But we also know that if I am pretty diligent about my research, I can talk about a surveillance detection route and have every street in Arabic or
Mhm.
in English
Mhm.
written down. I know that I can place me in La Terraza, the restaurant on the
Mhm.
coast, and you can do all these, and you can see pictures of that because people have posted about their times there. And so you can get very particular about that, but you also can spend 25 hours researching what Casablanca downtown region looks like, and then just overwhelm us all with too much detail, too much accuracy.
Mhm. Well, that's the thing, right? Because I am not a spy, like what is my like unique offer? The unique
Right.
offer is that I've lived in all these places, and to
Mm.
me it was really important to lean into my own biography and my own experiences there and just kind of use them in the service of this story. And that was a challenge, and it limited me in some ways, but it was also really cool because I gave myself a couple of hard rules when I was writing this book. So no scene in the Collaborators takes place anywhere where I haven't lived myself.
Mm. Mhm.
And the other one is no character speaks a language I myself don't speak, and if I speak it badly, so will they. Um,
Good
so
rule.
yeah, so those were limiting, but in the best possible way because they like the geography of the book is the geography of my life.
Mm.
I've lived in in Latvia, in the US. I spent 5 years in Berlin. I have a little house in Portugal where I spend a lot of time. So all these places, turn up in the book. And you're absolutely right. You can just use like Google Earth and just walk this, walk every street in the world and then describe it, and you'll be pretty
Yeah.
accurate. But there's connections there and little observations that only come from experience. And for me, for example, um, the fact that, let's say, at some point, my character recuperates after a poisoning at Berlin's Charité hospital, and Charité is famous for resuscitating victims of the Russian Novichok. That's where they saved Alexei Navalny. Unfortunately, he ended up going back to Russia and dying in prison, but still, this is where they saved him. They saved a couple of people whom I know whose cases were not as publicized. So I knew that, okay, if you're poisoned by a nerve agent in Istanbul, as my guy is, you will get flown to Charité because that's the best chance you have. And once you're in Charité, because I lived in Mitte in that neighborhood in Berlin, I know what's across the street. Well, across the Invalidenstrasse is the Natural History Museum, and so it made sense for my character to meet with his superior at the Natural History Museum. And then I know, like, I had my own little notes about like some exhibits there, and so I can have them realistically like walk past real exhibits as they talk. And this is the kind of stuff that can only come from actually living somewhere, because like no Google Maps will lead you there, because you just have to walk these steps yourself in order to write authoritatively about it. And of course, Moscow, that was really interesting, because the Moscow that is shown in the Collaborators is really unlike a lot of what you read in spy fiction. Like a massive scene takes place in Skolkovo, which is this sort of half-built, half-abandoned kind of technopark outside of Moscow that they wanted to be their Silicon Valley. And they built and populated all these buildings with like all these startups and all that. And this was like a Medvedev era dream, so once they've decided on another course of action and invaded Crimea instead, of course all that thing, that entire neighborhood like fell into, not ruin exactly, but no one really needs it. Like the modern Russia doesn't need this sort of fake San Francisco or fake Palo Alto that they've built 20 minutes outside of Moscow. And this is the kind of thing that, like, I've been there, I've been to parties there, I've used one of these buildings as a shooting location. So knowing this is really helpful. Like and this is the kind of stuff that you can only get from sort of boots on the ground, really. And in that sense, I was like, well, okay, I may not know what the inside of of the NSA building looks like, or but I do know what Skolkovo looks like, and a lot of people paid a lot of money to know what it looks like actually don't. So I'm gonna lean into that.
Yeah. I love it. You said boots in the ground, and I think from my point of view, there's even a level below that, and it's what you're really talking about is ground truth. Like I lived in this district in Berlin, and everybody knows there that that's like where the best waffles are, and turns out the best Krankenhaus for when you have nerve damage or whatever it's going to be. But that ground truth comes through because you have walked through, and this is exactly what I would do. Like if I was in that kind of a espionage atmosphere and I was going to have a source meet of some kind, or I was the source meeting my handler, whatever it is, I'd want to go to the Natural History Museum and I'd want to understand where the things were and whatever my signal was going to be, like, hey, it's all safe, we're going to do the meeting, or no, let's cancel and meet late, whatever those things are. I would walk that and I would think through deliberately a long time about how do I make this so it's obvious but invisible at the same time. And you have to have that ground truth to understand that in that kind of a setting.
Well, here's a crazy thing that it's funny to think about it, but Putin's war on journalists in many ways have made a lot of people in my circle who are not spies actually act like spies.
Sure.
What I mean by this is it's a question of safety. It's a question of security, because people get poisoned. People, I know personally, like people who, are doing sensitive work, not clandestine work, but sensitive work that really look both ways crossing the street. And when I meet them in this or that European capital, I don't go to Russia ever since the war broke out, because I publicly supported Ukraine and publicly donated to Ukraine's military, which basically is a crime in Russia. So I deliberately wanted to just cut off that temptation to ever work with them again.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm obviously giving Moscow a wide berth, but even when I meet my friends who are mostly journalists and writers in Eastern Europe, I mean, Pete, we go full on Moscow rules. We meet at train stations because you can't text about a meet at a cafe. 2 years ago, my name was on a leaked list of public figures whose social media are being monitored by the FSB. So you have to act accordingly when you go somewhere. You want to post on Instagram from that place, but I only post once I've gotten back to the US. Just so sort of common sense stuff like that. That it's crazy to think that us civilians who do absolutely normal work have to do this, but as the war progresses, as the Russian regime just kind of entrenches more and more into the new status quo, everyone they don't like is a foreign agent now, right? That's right. The designation they have, foreign agent, and this could mean a literal spy under diplomatic cover, or it can mean a guy who sells I don't know, crafts on Etsy and got paid in dollars once. That makes him a foreign agent, right? The real definition of foreign agent is anyone we don't like. So with that, there's really the difference between spies and non-spies in terms of behavior has really dwindled lately.
Yeah. Well, my undergrad degree is in TV, radio, broadcasting, so it's a journalism type degree, and we learned about protecting sources. This is before I had ever run a source ever, and so it's I'm oh, this is just you will go to jail if you have to not reveal your source, because you have to have that integrity, and that same level of integrity goes through all the things that we do. I would say, from my point of view and how I do things, and it's all different between all of us, but I am trying to be as real and normal as possible. So I might communicate on Signal if I need to, but I also want my chatter to be present so that I don't disappear. I've got friends that you can't look up, but then if you can't find them, it's oh, now we have to look into this person. And I believe that would possibly target you more once they found out, oh, this guy doesn't even exist on the internet. I'd rather be present and just be voluminous and out there, so that when I do go dark on a comm, it doesn't stand out. So if I do use Signal or WhatsApp or paper and a pigeon, I don't do this work anymore, just so everybody else understands, but this is sort of my philosophy on it. Even when I go to combat, I say, I'm Pete. I'm from California. Ask me anything you want. I'll ask you questions, and that's it. I'm open. And they've said this, are you a spy? And I'll say, yes. And if I ask you a question you don't like, don't answer it, because I'm not here to harm anybody. So that's sort of how I live in my thing.
Yeah. Well, you know what? James Bond movies are obviously largely fantasy and nonsense, but they do get one thing right. And I used to think this was really comical, that when he walks into a room, kind of everyone goes, "Oh, that's James Bond, the famous British spy," right? I always thought this was ridiculous, but the truth is that's kind of how it is. People do know. It's especially with the spies under diplomatic cover, they're monitored and tolerated. So this whole deep cover thing, when it's your neighbor who's supposedly from Canada but with a weird accent, and then it's oh no, he was a Russian spy. Only Russia does that shit.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's so true. Yeah.
No, seriously. I mean, who else did deep? I don't know. The WASP network. No, they didn't lie about being Cuban. They just lied about what side they were on. So right. So yeah, that's just. Yeah. Sorry, you were saying that just kind of popped into my head.
But Jack Barsky, one of the reasons, I don't know if you know, Jack was East German, run by the Soviet side. And he was a spy, and he was an embedded spy here. And they based that show, The Americans, on him. And so I know things that he has to do to maintain that cover. And I'm like, at what point did you just run out of hours in the day? Because you're covering your cover and you're always nervous about your cover being covered. And so then you think, and so you become paranoid. And he's like, I started making so much money in software. Like, what am I doing? And so he flipped himself, and he didn't flip, he just turned off the machine. But another thing I want to say about that is when I'm out and I'm going into this village and that village, all these other places, and I'm trying to meet these elders, and I'm making this network of people in Afghanistan, Iraq, wherever I'm at. I want to be the same person that they encounter everywhere I go. So sure, I can say my name is Bill, but I'd rather just be 100% honest and be like, I'm Pete. I can prove I'm Pete. You can look me up. I'm Pete. And so that when they talk about me, they talk about the same dude. And if I've done my job and I've been myself and I'm a likable guy, then I'm going to show up as a likable guy that they want to talk to, because that's what I need. I need to make friends. I don't need to hide from people. I need to be accessible. And it's okay if the enemy knows I'm there and they target me. That means I'm playing the game. If you don't exist to anybody, from my point of view, how I do things, then I'm not fully in the game. I'm playing, but I'm playing on the field by myself.
Absolutely, and that's actually in the beginning of the book. So the main character runs an influence operation out of Latvia, where he's basically, his cover is a media investor, and what he does is he sort of feeds. He kind of uses the investigative, powers of the CIA to feed stories that are damaging to the Kremlin to Russian opposition press, right? To their Russian opposition media, which is, something people actually do. And the thing about this, like his internal monologue, is that in a normal world, like what my cover would be the exact thing I do. It's what I do. I'm a media investor. I literally, like, it's just that because the stories are damaging to the Kremlin, like doesn't make them less true. What we're doing is we're supporting journalists. And then of course he has a crisis of conscience that sort of jumpstarts the book, because his assets keep getting, in trouble and keep getting jailed, and finally when he snaps, killed for what they do. So he's sort of, he's in the position, as he said, of a guy who keeps bringing in stray cats that are then eaten by coyotes. And he says, like, once you subtract the question of intent, you run a coyote feeding program, and that's sort of what sends him, on his way in the novel. But yeah, it's true. A lot of stuff that's being done, clandestinely in a normal world would just be done openly.
Yeah, you're right. And if you can do it openly, most of the time, it's better, because you're just being, like when for movies, you have to do this, but in a real life, a bona fides, I wouldn't come up to you and say, I need to get to the tall corn. I would never say that. That's an actual line from a movie. Like, I think Brad Pitt calls up, he's like, I need to get to the tall corn. And then they start saying some ridiculous thing back to him. And it's all in code. In reality, I'd say, hey, aren't you an author? And then you would say the words back to me. They're like, yeah, I've written a bunch of books. I don't know. Which one have you read? And then I would say, oh, the Collaborators. And you'd be like, yeah. And so that would be our signal, right? And there'd be special language in there a little bit, just so that random conversation couldn't happen. But that'd be what it was. It'd be as plain as day. And I would think about it. Or maybe I would say, didn't you write? And I'd pick a book by, I don't know, somebody else. I'd pick, what's a book over there? Didn't you write American Spy? And you'd be like, no, that's what's his name. And then I'd be like, oh, what's his name? Cool. We're on, right? And that'd be the thing. And it'd be a totally normal conversation. But in movies, you can't do that, because you need, I don't know, why do we have to, I mean, the audience can know, but why does it have to be such a ridiculous bona fides?
I don't know. I always there are these like call and response things that are pretty ridiculous in real life, and this is something that the GRU uses, like names of flowers and things like that, and they go like cornflower, bluebell, and like they do that, which I also have in the book. But it's obviously, but that is, I think every author struggles with that. How much do you sacrifice to just keep things exciting? And and my answer to that is enough exciting things happen in real life. It's like you don't have to make stuff up all that much. I mean, look at the world we live in. Look at we live in the world where like Israel remotely explodes pagers. Have you followed the whole like Nord Stream sabotage story? I mean, that's wilder than most. Like if I came up with that plot, like people would be like, oh, okay, I see you're off the realistic track and like are doing Bond stuff now, because it's like Ukrainians on a yacht have just done it, but yeah, there's so much stuff. I've read this, there's an amazing story in the New Yorker from a few months back about like the Russian espionage efforts in Norway, right? Like because the Arctic is like the next theater, and just a lot of stuff like that. You just read it and you see things like, it's not. I love Le Carré. Everyone who's in this business does or should, and he is absolutely the best. But the action climax of a Le Carré book is usually like two people like talking in a room for a chapter, right? But the truth, and if you go from that to like car chases and explosions, then that means, okay, we've now left the realistic spy genre and we are in in the world of James Bond. But the truth is, like, explosions happen, for better or worse. Car chases happen, and which is why a lot of stuff in the book, it's another rule that I had for myself. Almost everything in the Collaborators that were it to happen in real life would make the news, like something big enough that would make the news, has some sort of real counterpart. Like the opening scene is based on a 2021 Ryanair incident where a plane was flying, I believe, from Athens to a Ryanair plane was flying from Athens to Vilnius, passing over Belarusian territory. And there was a Belarusian dissident on board. So they called a fake bomb threat, supposedly scrambled a jet, made the plane land in Minsk, yanked the guy off the plane, and sent the rest back. That is an absolutely wild story, and it cost Belarus their entire aviation industry, because they've basically become like a rogue state at that moment. And like their national airline Belavia doesn't fly anywhere anymore, and no one flies over them because like, oh, they're guys who like yank down our planes and make people off of them. But can you put but putting myself into like, this has been a nightmare of mine, like my entire life. Remember the movie White Nights with Michael Baryshnikov, with Baryshnikov and Gregory Hines? Yeah, like the plot is like, this famous dancer has defected to the U.S. and they're like flying over Russia and the plane breaks down or something, and he's back where he started. Like, this is that in real life. So I feel like a lot of immigrants, especially like dissidents, have that nightmare of just like flying over their old country and being forced down. And so that story struck me so much, I've made it the opening scene of the book.
Yeah, when I was doing some research on the book, I don't have the book. I will be getting it. By the way, if you guys are interested like me in the book, look at the link down below. That's where you can go to Michael's page, or even better, you can go to Amazon and click on that link. I would get a little bit of that if you buy it through Amazon. Or you can go to one of the local bookstores. If you go back to Michael's link, let's put that up here. His book tour is going on, and he'll be in California the next week, and when the book drops, and a lot of other places. So you guys should definitely go check it out. And you know what I always say? Buddy read, buy two, grab a friend, be like, hey, let's read this book together. You don't have to join a book club. You can just make your own and just buy a couple of books, send them out to your friends for Christmas. That's what we do. And you hear how interesting Michael's story is and what an interesting person he is. That's why I want you guys to support him. So I wanted to say this about taking real events. Gosh, and I don't have the Russian good enough to say, but the Kakhovka Dam that was blown up last year.
Right. Yeah. You're close. Yeah.
I'm close. I'm trying to get it right.
It's an MKH. Yeah. You just pronounce it as ha. Yeah. It's like, it's more like an Arabic ha. Kakhovka. Right. Yeah.
Which is funny because in Arabic, all the consonants matter. Vowels, they don't care about those. They don't even sometimes use it. Mahmet. What's the vowel in that? Nothing. They don't even care about vowels. But that dam blow up is a great premise for. I don't know if anybody's written about it yet, but they should, because there's only so many countries that can pull that off, and one of them is us. For sure. And so until we know otherwise, and so that way, like if Putin was like, "Oh, you guys did that," I would instantly be like, "That's probably true," because the amount of technology and explosives and the tactical capability to get in and out of that place, it's only possible by so many people. I mean, and that's really like you could bring in like an army engineer guy's like, "Oh, it would take 2,000 pounds of explosives. You'd have to backpack that in. That's 10. And all of a sudden this operation becomes this long, crazy thing all wrapped around, I don't know, a bank robbery like in Die Hard or something. But real life events that no one knows about, they're your playing ground. You could say anything. And even if you know what it is, you could say that's what they say, but here's what actually happened, much like Tom Clancy in Red October.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I wrote the bulk of the book in 2022, and back then the war was just like really sort of fresh in everyone's mind, and I was just horrified to see that this happened. And I had friends in Kiev and friends in Moscow, and I felt it would be wrong at that moment to kind of like plunder this thing that was happening like right there and then, for like fun, spy plots. So
Sure.
I ended up setting this book in the summer of 2021. So it's kind of like period and not period. It's set in the
Gotcha.
last possible moment of sort of the previous status quo. Now I would, and it's not a secret. I'm writing a sequel to the Collaborators. Scribner were amazing enough, and sort of they believe in the book enough to have contracted me for a sequel to it half a year ago. Way before the first one came out, which was, I'm told, doesn't happen a lot these days. So I'm sort of grudgingly setting the sequel in sort of the here and now, but I'm still like, it's one thing I don't want to head into, because this is where I feel like my expertise will absolutely betray me and I'll just be a pretender, is anything that has to do with the actual theater of war. Like I don't, I don't feel right going there. So I'm setting it kind of on the margins. There's some of the action is set in the Republic of Georgia, which is a really interesting place right now because 20% of the country is occupied by Russia. At the same time, they have like a vehemently anti-Russian population, pro-Russian government, and a bunch of anti-war refugees from Russia, sort of, who streamed into Tbilisi when the war started. So it's kind of an insane powder keg of a society right now. So that to me is something I can do, like to be on the margins. Like I would never be able to pull off like the Kakhovka Dam, like, thing like you, I think would, because that is what your that's closer to your experience. I've
Sure.
I'm definitely a civilian and should know my place.
I mean, you definitely can find the same people as me, though. Like, hey, Pete, can you introduce me to an army engineer who would understand what it would take to blow that dam up? Yeah, I can find you that person. And can you find me a special operations guy that would tell us how to build a team? And all of a sudden, we have the pieces. It's interesting. So Jack Carr has been on the show before, and we were talking about his fight scenes because they're very descriptive. You can almost do the actions that are happening. And I asked him about that. He's like, "Oh yeah, that's because I take the guy that trains SEALs in hand-to-hand combat, and I say, here's what I'm trying to do, and that guy will go and he will actually physically do the motions of that scene and film it for Jack, and then Jack watches it and he writes it, and that's why it's so detailed. He has someone literally just perform it for him, and it's an amazing. When you read his fight scenes, they really are fantastic. It's one of the best things about what he does. Sure, he's a SEAL, but I would say he's even a better author than he was a SEAL, because he's taken that thing, that reality, and he's really zoomed in on parts of it that you don't get. Like, we can also talk about like the gear and the scope and the kind of shoe that everybody wears, but he gets a deeper detail even than that. And I think anybody can do that. Anybody can spend the time to connect, because we are also connected now. But then again, if you don't feel real about it, then I guess you probably shouldn't do it.
That's the balance, because I know I can, I'm always happy to take advice from experts and, thank them in the book and things like that. I mean, look, I had a couple of like gun details, in the book that I had to like run by actual, gun guys, because like there's a plot point that depends on like the double action pistols, like the first pull being very long, and like that is, I needed to like check that. I needed to talk to people who know the difference, like that. There's stuff like that. Absolutely, you got to do that. But there's also, you're right, but it also has to feel real. It can't just all be research, because there's a reason why I'm basing this around the places I've lived. I understand that I could probably pull off something set in, let's say, South America. Like it would take me like probably twice the time with the research and like a few research trips. And I feel like there's still going to be something fake around it. Like even, I don't know, there's going to be a whiff of like, okay, this is just research. At least, I mean, more talented people might pull it off without ever setting foot anywhere. But,
sure. But you have to know how you color, right? And so, like when I talked earlier about my stupid novella that I'm writing, I've written a couple of them, and I just, I'm not comfortable with them being out because I'm just not confident in them, right? And so I post all kinds of things that I write about baseball and everything else, but I've never had the confidence in what I was, even though I've done the job. I've never been like, this is good, I'll put this out. And my bar for this is good, I'm like, I'm just shoving it out. I get to a point where I'm like, that's it. And in baseball, I write anything. But when it comes to my own craft, it's a lot harder for me to describe. Maybe it's because I have so much context, I don't know. But it's hard for me to, one, fabricate a reality that makes sense to me, because a lot of what I do in the moment, I don't even know what I'm doing. It's all feel for me. And because I've done it so much, and trying to translate that knowledge without making a superhero, because I'm not one, that's proven to be hard for me in a fictional setting.
Well, too much knowledge is kind of a curse too, because you don't. It's hard to tell. First of all, when something is like your world, it's hard to predict what parts of it are interesting to outsiders and what are not, and you can really get into the weeds.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. I get that. And actually that's why it was hard for me to write scenes that are set in Moscow, because I'm like, oh, I know this. I know that person. I can I can put all of this, like, because I've lived there for like several years, and my experience in Moscow is insane, because I was the editor-in-chief of the Russian edition of GQ. So I ended up like hanging out with like elites, but also like hanging out with the media people, also befriending dissidents like the late great Navalny and Pussy Riot and like all these people. So it was just like the wealth of experience that I've had there. Just I was like, I need to stop trying to cram it into the 20 pages that my characters spend in Moscow. Like, you really need to like chill. Like, you're not. It's not about proving to the audience that you know something. You have to pick the things that make sense for the story.
Yeah, that's ego, right? That's ego getting out of the way as you get older and wiser, and not needing to prove anything. You actually can get to the spot. I mean, my work again is all about, like, you have to surrender your ego. It's never about me. And I just had a show yesterday. I don't know if you know Robin Dreek's work. Robin Dreek was also a counterintelligence agent. He was in the FBI, and we have great talks because we both have that context already in us. And so we're having a high level conversation, but we're able to bring it down to where regular people can understand it. And we were just talking about different elements of how you build trust and how ego is not important. And it's on me to be able to withstand working in an Arabic place where they have a different religion, different culture, different kind of economy. And if I can accomplish my mission, if I can get to B from A on their path, and it's uncomfortable, it's on me to withstand that path. It's not on them. So if I can use their path, my job is easier to collect things because I'm not costing them anything. If anything, I'm helping them solve a problem. And so that's sort of the essence of what I try to do. Does this make sense at all to you?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Um, I gotta ask you like a provocative question.
Please. Yeah, that's fine.
Do you feel like do you feel like your work, what you were trying to achieve, in the theater and in the Gulf War and, in Afghanistan, would like, does it make sense to have like a guy who looks and sounds like you to be the sort of the forefront of it? Or like, is it the function of just like not having enough people of actual Arabic heritage? Because I've always struggled with this, when it comes to like the Eastern European part of it, because it's like you read books and you read memoirs by, diplomats and spies, and some of it is like, okay, they're fantastic at what they do, but it's just, isn't it easier to just get like a guy from the place?
Yeah. I mean,
is it that
maybe.
difficult? I don't know. Did you have colleagues of Arabic descent working with you?
Yeah, there's a book. Here's a book right here, The Unit, by a guy named Adam. Well, calls himself Adam Gamal, but there it is. He wrote this book, and he worked in a really high-end secret unit, and he was born in Egypt, and so he is of those places, and he is Arabic, and he's Islamic, and so. But there's only so many of those guys, and there's some other truths in this work. So if you understand human nature, and you understand that you've got a barrier in front of you, because we all do when we start out, like we all have to get through that barrier. Once you learn how to get around it, like women have a huge advantage in the Mideast because they can just disappear. They're not taken seriously. They're by and large ignored, or they're so fascinating. These guys can't stop wagging their tongues. It's like they will honeypot themselves.
Oh,
right?
that's interesting. So actually it's kind of, it could be an asset to be like the other, because you're interesting and people don't expect you to get it, which
yes,
actually,
right.
Okay, that's cool.
I call myself Johnny. I'm Johnny Goodtime when I go some places. I'm the guy from California, and they're just like, "Hey, is that Pete guy coming back?" And this is what I'm looking for. These are my KPIs. Are they going? Hey, when's Pete going to come back? And so like the commander be like, hey, they're asking for you over there. And I don't look at that in a negative way. I look at it in a positive way. I want that to happen. Again, I'm on the field, and they like me, and they want to do things. I cooked dinner one time in Afghanistan for a bunch of Afghans on the military and the government side. On their earthen stove over cardboard, I made them tacos. And you got to know that like that kind of ability to put myself in their world and show them mine, that nobody can beat that. I am beloved in that area because I didn't harm anybody. I came in, I was nice to them, I got who they were, and I showed them who I was. And so, yeah, you have to know what that wall is in front of you, but there's absolutely ways to turn it into an advantage. Sometimes it doesn't work.
Thank you. No, that's actually really cool to talk about this. I've always been fascinated by that. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I do well, and they don't teach us this, is I use interpreters really well. And I don't like the amount of words that they have in the military doctrine for how to use an interpreter are not nearly enough. They'll teach you more how to fire a Barrett, 50 cal rifle, than they will about how to work an interpreter. And I love to ask this question. And this is, I think this will be good insight for anyone, but particularly, I think you'll get this. I'll ask my SEAL friends, my Green Beret friends, even my peers like me, have you fired more bullets in combat or had more conversations? And they'll be like, way more conversations. But we don't train like that. We train like there's going to be a firefight every single day. And, it's like, well, we're doing more talking. So let's for sure be ready for a firefight. But also, shouldn't we get better at the talking and the using the interpreter? And we don't ever do that. So that really hinders our ability to figure out what that wall looks like and how to get around it.
Yeah. Amen. I mean, what can I say? Yeah, for sure. I think that's a great advice for everyone.
Yeah. And I like to say, like, where is the work? Well, the work for me is being prepared to do what nobody else can do, because that's my job. I have unique access. I have unique skills. And so I don't worry about the bombs. And you'll appreciate this because I usually say it in German, like if you want to find out where the bombs are, the worst way to do that is to go into town and go, "Where is the bombs?" Run around asking where the bombs are. No one's going to tell you that. That's not how you go about it. So you have to find your way of not asking that question. And then if you're good, like I am, the information will just start flooding in faster than you can even ask the questions, and from more people than you can even ask the questions of. It will just be, that information will be desperate to get to me. I've just got to build that machine that allows that to happen.
That's fascinating. Oh,
yeah.
cool.
And again, easier said than done.
Yeah. Well, if that makes its way into your novella, I would love to read it.
Tell me about, well, first off, we're talking about your book right now, and I will definitely, I'll pick it up and I'll work on it some.
Yeah, we really need to make sure you get it. I'll write to my publisher.
Nice. So what I want to ask you though is, in your book and from some of the reviews I've read and everything, there's an element about the government and what appears to be from their point of view, critique of how we go about things. And I know I've seen this where our presumption about our adversary or our ally or our person we pick within our ally. I mean, just think about the Ukrainians and how poorly the Americans have picked the people that we want to partner with. Like these billionaires are good because they give money to the right organizations in America. These billionaires are oligarchs. Let's ostracize them. Like we do that all the time. Is that an accurate read on some of the stuff that's in your book?
Well, here we're getting into like the slightly spoilery area. So
I don't want to get too spoilery.
Because like the book does end up talking about something that happened in the 90s, and that's sort of the big secret at the heart of it. But some of it is really in like, it's open source. I think, how shall I put it? One of the things that the US needs to learn to do is not to gloat. We've seen this in Afghanistan. We have certainly seen this in Russia, because the little post-Cold War victory lap that the US took pretty much ended up giving us Putin. I mean, that's sort of, there's a direct connection between Russians just feeling absolutely humiliated and not invited to the club. Like, the idea was, just sort of, you have to be kind to a vanquished foe, right? And to me, the original sin of the modern Russia has always been 1996 Yeltsin's re-election, right? Okay, so for those of you listening in who have no idea what I'm talking about, the year's 1996. Russia has been, free of the communist regime for 5 years now. Things are bad. The economy is in the toilet, and so Yeltsin is polling at 3%, the least popular leader ever. At the same time, there's a huge possibility of the communists staging a comeback, an honest comeback, like just winning the upcoming election. So what do? Do you let them come back in, or do you hire a bunch of American consultants, prop Yeltsin up, pretty much rig the election, give Russia a sweetheart loan from the IMF, like, conditional on Yeltsin winning, and basically do that. And this, and they did, and Yeltsin, eked out a win. But what was the one lesson that every Russian learned from this? The democracy is a sham, and we are basically and we are America's puppets.
Right.
So maybe that was the moment where we should have just stood back and let the communists come back, because they would already, people had already had like the taste of private enterprise and all that. Like they wouldn't come back to be like hardline communists. It would probably be something closer to China, just smaller and more manageable. And looking at the world now, one wonders, wouldn't that have been a preferred outcome? A stable Russia that doesn't feel like the entire world is against it. And so the book is kind of a fun genre way of getting back to like what happened in 96 and what could have been done differently. So that's sort of my answer to that.
There's a lot of foreign policy smarts in what you're talking about too, because there is, I'll just be ridiculous and I'll say there's a Russia demise industrial complex in our academic military class where they write these papers and they're just desperate for their idea. And so to be the right idea. So they'll write these things, they'll talk on it, they'll get paid to speak on it, and they're not deluding themselves. They're just finding a path, and that's where everything leads them, and they make more money and they get more influence. And so when this happens, they're just desperate for it to happen. They're like, I told you guys, and so this thing, it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy of where we were headed. And where are we headed? I mean, we don't want an unstable, wobbly Russia. Russia takes care of a lot of things for the world. It's huge. And it's got a lot of neighbors. And if for every reason in the world, it should break into 1,000 pieces and be less stable. But thankfully, it's not. It's not ideal, but we don't get to pick how they do things. So we're desperate for them to lose power. But to what end? And the last thing we want is a nuclear power to be like, we give up. Here's all. I mean, we've already saw what happened the last time that they had to purge everything. It wasn't good, right? So yeah, I struggle with this foreign policy.
Well, yes, half the 90s was spent like chasing loose nukes that were being sold for like $100. I know what you mean. I mean, there's, I think there is an absolute duty to support Ukraine. Right. That is, to me, that is sort of that doesn't need any further. Ukraine is not a perfect country, but at least they know it and they're working on it, and they have the basic institutions in place. Like, if the war ends tomorrow, will Zelensky be the most popular politician the day after tomorrow? No, he will not. No. He will probably be voted out. Like, that's the and they have mechanisms that make it okay for something like this to happen and not have it be catastrophic. Whereas Russia has been so thoroughly remade in Putin's image that, like, if you erase Putin from the picture, it's just wild chaos. No one knows. That's the danger of the sort of personality-driven, policy, right? Because it's a matter of it's just a wild gamble. And believe me, I don't see anyone within the Russian opposition who could be president tomorrow. Like, not even close. So it is a problem.
It is. Sure. Yeah. Then we have the other thing where, like, right now we have the Israeli, we'll just say Hamas in this case, conflict. And one of the ways to solve this is just to have Qatar stroke a giant check to Israel and say, give up some of this land so we can get the rest of your neighbors off your back. And we're going to invest so much fucking money in you guys, it won't even matter. Shouldn't we have just started there? Like, if this was going to be a money trade for land, couldn't we have just bought that out and not gone with this whole crazy two-state solution thing? Why do so many people have to die and get torn apart? Same thing in Ukraine and Russia. If we had the ability to end this thing with some money, then do it. Because Russia has so much influence, so many levers to pull. We think it's a direct thing, but it's not. And Putin has a lot of power. And because we feed so much into that, he gets even more power. He has a lot more things he can do to us.
I'm going to sit this one out when it comes to Israel and Palestine.
Fair enough.
But let me just say that if money can save lives, money should be parted with. Absolutely. Whenever and wherever. Yes. Yeah. No worries, and no expectation for you to get into things you don't want to get into. Right.
These are interesting times for sure, and I love that you're writing about them. Everybody should get your book. That's the website to get all of Michael's work. This is the Amazon.
I think it's better to just go. I mean, honestly, the website is so rudimentary. Just go to Amazon, or better yet, support your local bookseller. I'm very happy to say that the book is a pick for December by the Independent Booksellers Association. So it's actually going to be prominently featured in thousands of independent bookstores. So support those, and come in, get it, have a nice conversation with the snooty guy at the counter, and hopefully he'll recommend my book. Or if you don't want that experience, just get it on Amazon or wherever, Target, wherever books are sold. There.
You can go to
That's my plug.
Godmother's in Summerland on the 20th of November. You can go to Mysterious Bookshop on the 19th. There's all kinds of places where you can go, and Book Soup in LA, where I may come see you. Maybe I'll go to
that'd
La
be
Jolla,
great.
but
Yeah. And
it's super neat.
If any folks here are listening to this are in New York, I would love to see you at the Mysterious Bookshop on the 19th. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, let me run these credits. I'll come right back to you and say goodbye. Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much.